Hello, and welcome to another episode of 15 Minutes of Freedom on Stopping Socialism TV and the Stopping Socialism Podcast Network. My name is Justin Haskins, the editor-in-chief of StoppingSocialism.com, research fellow and editorial director at the Heartland Institute, and columnist at Fox News and FoxBusiness.com. Today's topic is an incredibly important topic. It's just incredibly important. It's sensitive. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, for those of you who have been following what Donald Kendall and I and others here at the Heartland Institute and Stopping Socialism have been doing, you know that we care very deeply about human rights. You know that we're not racists. You know that we're not bigots. You know that we want equality, true equality, real equality for all people. I care very deeply about that. And I've written for many, many years about how to improve poverty, how to fix impoverished communities. And as many people know, I'm sure as you know, African-American communities, statistically speaking, are much more likely to be impoverished, much more likely to suffer from crime. African-American males are much more likely to end up in prison. They're much more likely to be killed on the street. There are a lot of problems facing African-American communities. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And frankly, white people, not to speak for all white people, but a lot of white people are afraid to talk about it. They're afraid to talk about what's really going on in African-American communities. They're afraid to express their opinion because they're going to be shouted down. They're going to be called a racist. Well, I'm called a racist all the time anyway, no matter what I say. So instead of saying away from this issue, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. In particular, I want to talk about defunding the police. So very recently, Black Lives Matters, the organization, not just individuals in the community who identify with Black Lives Matters, but the organization Black Lives Matters and related organizations and allied groups like the Movement for Black Lives, they've come out recently and they have called for defunding the police nationally. Some local Black Lives Matters organizations, like Black Lives Matters in Philadelphia, they actually have a timetable. They want to completely get rid of the police, abolish in just a 5-year period. They say that this is necessary, that this is essential, because the police is fundamentally a racist institution. Systemic racism. It's fundamentally racist. It's rotten to the core. We have to get rid of it. That's what we're being told. That's what we're being told by Black Lives Matter. Now, again, I'm not talking, what I'm about to say, this is not directed toward everybody who identifies with Black Lives Matters. It's not. I believe that there are reforms that are necessary to improve African-American communities, to improve all communities, but especially people who are impoverished. The system that exists today is not a good system. It traps people in poverty. It doesn't help people get a hand up so that they can get out of poverty. It traps people in them. That's the system that we have today. Okay? A lot of reforms are necessary. They're needed. I'm not saying we should just do nothing. I'm not saying that there aren't police reforms that we could make. There are. I think no-knock raids are absolutely terrible. I don't think we should have no-knock raids. I think police should wear body cameras, both for their own defense and for civil liberties reasons. I believe it's important to hold people accountable who break the law, whether they're police or they're private citizens or they're corporations or whatever. If you break the law, you should be held accountable. And I think that body cameras might help that. With all that said, the movement to defund the police in this country, the idea that we're just going to take away all the police, take that money away, and instead we're going to pump it into welfare programs that all these national Black Lives Matters organizations are calling for, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself, Comrade AOC, she wants to do this too. The fact that the idea that this is somehow a good idea, that this is somehow going to help African Americans, that this is about Black lives and how they matter is absolute nonsense. It's despicable what's happening, in fact, to police. It's appalling and disturbing how the entire country has looked the other way while police have been treated as criminals automatically just for being police. It's absolutely outrageous that this has happened. I want you to think about something that's happened recently to kind of illustrate my point. In all of 2020, the entire year up to this point, okay, so more than 6 months, there have been, according to the Washington Post police shooting database, there have been 7 people, African Americans, who have been unarmed and killed by police. 7 in these 6 months. Now, I'm not saying that all those shootings were justified. I'm not saying that all those shootings were unjustified. I don't know the individual circumstances behind all of those encounters with the police. But what I do know is that the number, according to the Washington Post database, is 7. 7 people have been shot and killed by police who are unarmed, who are African American. Okay? 7. Just over July 4th weekend. All right, let me pull up the number so I can get it exactly right. All right, just over July 4th weekend, far more people were killed in cities across America. Far more. In Chicago alone, from June 29th to July 5th, that week that covered July 4th weekend, from June 29th to July 4th in just Chicago, or July 5th in just Chicago alone, 4 times more black people, or 4 times more people, not necessarily black people, but 4 times more people were killed in just that 1 week than the number of black people who have been killed, unarmed black people who have been killed by police in all of 2020. So 1 week in Chicago saw 4 times the number of people killed, most of them in the south side of Chicago, which is predominantly contains African-American communities, all right? Not necessarily all of the south side, but a lot of the south side is predominantly African-American. 4 times the number of people were killed in that 1 week than have been killed in an entire 6 months, half a year, unarmed people by police. And yet we're talking about defunding police. And that's just in Chicago. That's just in Chicago. In a whole host of cities over the July 4th weekend, we saw a massive number of people who were killed, a massive number of murders. These are not police officers killing people. These are criminals, gangs, drug dealers, other criminals killing innocent people. There were, for example, over the July 4th holiday weekend in New York City, 44 people who were injured in New York, and at least 6 were killed. In Atlanta, there were 31 confirmed shooting victims and 5 deaths just over the holiday weekend, including an 8-year-old girl. An 8-year-old girl. And this 8-year-old girl, she was driving, she was in the car, I think in the back seat, with her mom and her mom's friend. And they were driving and they went to pull into a parking lot. And a crowd of people gathered around them and stopped the car, presumably to rob them or, take the car or something like that. An altercation broke out. That's all we know. And some member of the gang that stopped the car with this 8-year-old little girl in the back seat started shooting into the car. And they killed that 8-year-old girl. They killed her. 8 years old. They murdered her. In Chicago, 6 children, 6 were killed over the July 4th weekend. 6 kids. And we're told by Black Lives Matters, the organization, we're told that we have to get rid of police, that we're better off without police, that we don't need police, that if we just had more welfare programs, then we wouldn't have all of this crime that would exist, that the police are actually a greater threat. People are being murdered in all of these cities. African Americans are the biggest victim of this. And the only people standing up for these African Americans are police. Do we need police reform? Yes. There are things that we can do to reform police departments. Are there some bad eggs in police departments? Are there some racist people in police departments? Of course there are. But the idea that we should tear down the entire existing structure of defense in this country, ruining police departments all over the country, taking billions and billions of dollars away from police so that we can have more social workers and have more people, out in the streets mediating disputes between people, is not only laughably ridiculous, it's not only insane, It's dangerous, it's irresponsible, and it's disrespectful to the people who have lost their lives because of crime in this country. We need police officers. We need police officers to be better than what they've been so far, but we have to have them in our communities. Without police, what would we do? Who are you going to call when your neighbor gets raped or killed or shot? And for those of you who say, well, I don't have to worry about that. My neighbors aren't getting shot. They're not getting raped. They're not being robbed. Yeah, that's true in a lot of the country, but there are huge parts of this country where that is not true. And African Americans have experienced this at a significantly higher rate than other racial groups. If Black lives matter, then why are you defunding the police? In New York City, Mayor de Blasio, a far left-wing, quasi-socialist mayor, has called for cutting the police department budget by 1/6 $1 billion. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came out and said, you know what? That's not enough. Defund the police means defund the police. That's what she said. If you defund the police and people die as a result, you have blood on your hands. You do. Because everybody knows, every reasonable person knows, everyone who actually takes the time to look at these statistics and doesn't just hurl accusations at people, knows that the evidence shows overwhelmingly that police are not actually a danger to communities across the country, that generally speaking, police do defend their communities, that police are not a bunch of racist monsters. Again, there are some problems in police departments. We should work to reform them and fix them. We should always be working to reform and fix our institutions. But the idea that police should be defunded, the idea that we should destroy police, the idea that we don't need police, the idea that I care about Black lives, therefore I'm going to defund the police, this is a lie. So what's really going on here? What's really happening? Why is this occurring? Why are people who say they care about Black lives doing something that will so obviously hurt Black people? Why is this happening? I think that there are a number of explanations, but I think that the most obvious is this. Again, I'm only talking about the leadership of Black Lives Matter. Not regular people who don't necessarily understand what's going on, the full weight of that movement. But the leadership of Black Lives Matter are radical socialist Marxists. Okay, not all of them are Marxists. Some of them are just socialists. Some of them are progressives. But many of the leaders are Marxists. Patrisse Cullors, for example, is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, the organization. She admitted, I believe it was in 2015 on video in an interview, that she and many others in the organization are, quote, trained Marxists. If you go to the Movement for Black Lives website and you look at their policy platforms, the Movement for Black Lives is one of the largest Black Lives Matter organizations in the country. They say that one of their key platforms is getting rid of capitalism. We are anti-capitalist. That's what they say. Anti-capitalist. So much of what's happening is related to Marxism and socialism. It isn't about just improving racial equality. It isn't just about helping people. I'm sure that Marxists believe that Marxism is going to help people. I believe that socialists believe in the long run that socialism is going to help people. But in the process of getting there, they don't care who gets hurt. They don't care. Destroying institutions, destroying American history, tearing down our statues, ripping down George Washington's statue, vandalizing it, beheading it, wrapping American flag around it, and then setting it on fire, which is what they have done. That's more important to them than making sure that people actually are safe in their communities. Demonizing the police for every single thing that goes wrong is more important than protecting Black lives. If I'm wrong, why would anybody looking at the violence that happened in Chicago, in New York, in Atlanta, in other cities all across the country, why would they see that violence, see what's happening to Black communities, see how disproportionately Black people are being harmed by violent criminals who are not police officers? How could you look at that and not want to increase protection for those people? How could you look at that and say, no, actually, I want to take police away from these communities? Not want to reform them? Not, well, I want to take some of the money and move it over here. No. I want to completely defund them. I want to eliminate them. I want to get rid of them in 5 years. This is the sort of thing that they're saying. We are facing a momentous moment in American history. We are facing truly incredible times here. Not just because of COVID-19, not just because of violence in the streets, not just because of racism and other issues, but because there are people in this country who are openly calling for destroying every single thing that is good about America, along with the stuff that's bad. Tearing down our entire history, our entire culture, all of our major institutions that don't agree with them. Everybody who doesn't agree with the left is now a racist or a sexist or a homophobe or something else. Rational dialogue has completely gone out the window. We don't have conversations based on data, based on science, based on anything that actually matters. What we do instead is just hurl epithets at each other. We want to strangle each other. That's where America is right now. And it has to stop. If we're going to have any hope of saving this country, we can't just throw out every good part about America, because there are some parts that have been bad. America is an imperfect country. You know why? Because people are imperfect, and Americans are people. We are headed down a dangerous, dangerous road. And if we don't turn things around now, we're going to wake up one day and freedom is going to be a faint memory. It's going to be a footnote in some socialist history textbook. That's what it's going to be. We have to turn things around. We have to speak truth to power. We have to convince people that those of us who support individual liberty and free markets, we believe in rights for all people. Every single person, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, whoever you are, we believe that you have rights and that those rights are endowed by your creator, that they've been given to you, that they don't belong to the government. And we believe that all those people should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to their own property, to chart their own course in life, to make something of themselves, not to be bogged down, not to be prevented and blocked by some government regulatory body, not by anyone, not by a police department, not by a government agency, not by a corporation, not by anyone, that people have the right to pursue their dream. So long as that dream doesn't take away the rights of other people. It used to be common sense for people to believe in this vision of America. Now, you're a racist if you say this. I care deeply about Black lives. And because I care about Black lives, and because I care about Hispanic lives and white lives and women and children and men and everyone, I want this country to be successful. I want everyone to be wealthy, and I want people to be free and safe in their communities. Those of us who believe in conservative values shouldn't run away from this debate. Now more than ever, we need to stand up for what we believe, and we need to not only stand up for it just based on principle and say, well, hey, look, we support free markets and we support freedom, but we need to make the connection between free markets, freedom, and the benefits that those things provide to everyone in this country. If we don't make that connection, the left is going to continue to convince people all over the country that they're better off destroying statues and police departments, that they're better off destroying American history, that they're better off eliminating everything good about America, tearing it all down and rebuilding it. How? In the way in which the socialist left would have them build it. Giving power to government institutions, the ruling class, taking away rights for individuals. That's what the left will have for our country. We have to turn things around, and we have to turn things around now. I'm Justin Haskins, and this was 15 Minutes of Freedom. Thank you for joining me. If you're interested in more videos, maybe not quite like this, more podcasts, maybe not quite like this, but more podcasts, more videos about socialism, please go to stoppingsocialism.com. Please find the Heartland Institute, heartland.org. Find our podcasts on the Heartland Daily Podcast Network. You can find that on iTunes and Stitcher and every podcast network you could possibly think of. Please follow us on Facebook, Stopping Socialism, and follow me, Justin T. Haskins, on Twitter and Facebook. And until next time, please stay free.